A single mom's desperate mistake led her into a millionaire's car and a second chance at life. The first snow of winter had come early to Northbridge, coating the small town in a blinding white that swallowed sound. At the edge of Main Street, under a flickering streetlight, Rachel Monroe held her 3-year-old son tighter against her chest. Oliver's small body trembled, a rough cough shaking his frame. His skin was hot under her palm, and the steam of his breath rose into the freezing air. The night shift at the diner had just ended, leaving Rachel exhausted, her thin jacket soaked through from the sleet that had turned to snow. She bounced on her heels, whispering softly, "Just hold on a little longer, baby. The car's coming." Her phone showed the rideshare app, arrival in 2 minutes. She glanced toward the street, eyes blurred by snowflakes that melted the moment they hit her lashes. A sleek black sedan slowed beside her, headlights cutting through the white swirl. The last 3 digits on the license plate, 237, matched the ones on her screen. Without hesitation, she opened the rear door and slid inside, cradling Oliver close. "Thank you," she said quickly, breathless. "Please, Northbridge General. My son's sick. He's burning up." The warmth of the car wrapped around her instantly, but the man in the driver's seat didn't move. He turned slightly, revealing sharp features and eyes the color of winter steel. "I think you've mistaken my car," he said evenly. "This isn't a rideshare." Rachel froze. "What?" She glanced back at her phone. Its screen was black, battery dead. Her pulse thudded painfully in her ears. She looked out the window. Snow was already piling thick along the curb. Behind them, a tow truck's flashing lights illuminated a line of stalled vehicles. The main road was closed. She fumbled for the door handle, panic rising. I'm so sorry." "I'll get out." A deep cough from Oliver cut her off. The little boy's chest heaved as he struggled for breath. Rachel tried to soothe him, rubbing his back in small circles, but the sound that came out of him was wheezy and thin. The man's gaze flicked to the rearview mirror. For the first time, his composed face shifted, eyes softening just a little. "There's a small emergency unit 2 blocks west," he said, his tone steady. "They'll still be open." Rachel looked up, uncertain. "I can't ask you to." "You're not asking," he interrupted, shifting the gear. "Buckle up." The car pulled smoothly into motion, tires crunching through snow. Inside the quiet cabin, the hum of the heater filled the silence. Rachel held Oliver close, whispering reassurances that sounded more like prayers. Between quick glances at the child, the driver said calmly, "I know that clinic. I helped fund its new pediatric wing. The staff's good." She blinked, surprised. "You helped fund it?" "Adrian Cole," he said, offering the name like a formality. "I work in development." Rachel nodded faintly, though the name meant nothing to her. Her focus stayed on Oliver's shallow breaths. When they reached the emergency entrance, Adrian parked right by the door. Before Rachel could open her side, he was already there, stepping into the snow. He lifted Oliver gently, careful but decisive. "Inside," he said. "Go." They rushed into the bright corridor, where the sharp scent of antiseptic replaced the cold. Nurses moved quickly. Within seconds, Oliver was taken to an exam room. Rachel followed until a nurse stopped her at the door. "He'll be fine, ma'am. Just wait here." She collapsed onto a plastic chair, tears spilling silently. Her soaked jeans clung to her knees, her fingers trembling. A moment later, a cup of coffee appeared in her hands. Adrian had come back, coat dusted with snow. "Drink," he said quietly. "You're shaking." "I can't thank you enough," she whispered. "You didn't have to stop." He looked toward the exam room door. 3 years ago, my daughter caught pneumonia. The hospital near us didn't have a ventilator available. By the time we reached the city, it was too late." His voice didn't break, but the weight in it did. "Since then, I make sure every clinic in this county has what they need." Rachel stared at him, words lost. Finally, she said softly, "I'm sorry. I almost lost Oliver when he was born. I still wake up some nights just to check if he's breathing." The nurse returned a few minutes later, smiling. He's stable, mild pneumonia, but we'll keep him overnight for observation. Relief flooded Rachel so fast her knees went weak. She whispered, thank you, and turned toward Adrian. He simply nodded. I'll arrange for a room in the parents' ward. Get some rest. She hesitated. Why are you doing all this? He met her eyes, calm and unreadable. Because once I couldn't help someone who needed me. Tonight, maybe I can. Later, when the hallway fell quiet and snow tapped softly against the window, Rachel watched through the glass as Adrian spoke briefly to the night nurse and handed her something, a business card, maybe a donation slip. Before he left, he looked once toward the room where Oliver slept. Their eyes met through the pain. He gave a small nod, not of pity, but of understanding. Rachel sat beside her son's bed, brushing his hair back, and whispered, "We're safe now, baby." Outside, the snow kept falling, erasing the tracks of how they'd arrived, leaving only the moment that would change everything. Morning had not yet broken when the hum of the hospital quieted into something softer, steadier. The storm outside had calmed, but the air still smelled of cold snow drifting through the revolving doors. Rachel sat in the dimly lit parents' ward, a thin blanket draped over her shoulders. Oliver slept in the small bed beside her, his cheeks flushed, but no longer burning. A faint mist rose from the humidifier, and the rhythmic beep of the monitor was the only sound she wanted to hear. She hadn't closed her eyes all night. Every time she did, the memory of running through the snow came rushing back. The panic, the white blur, the wrong car, and the man who hadn't hesitated to help. When the door opened quietly, she looked up. Adrian Cole stood there, still in the same charcoal coat, his hair damp from the melting snow. "He's resting," she said, her voice low. Adrian nodded and stepped closer, glancing at the child. "His breathing's better." "The doctor said it's mild pneumonia," she replied. "He'll need medicine, but they think he'll be okay." Relief crept into her tone, mixed with disbelief. Adrian smiled faintly, the kind that softened his otherwise serious face. "That's good news. You did the right thing getting him here when you did." Rachel lowered her eyes. "If it weren't for you, we'd still be out there waiting. I didn't even know this clinic existed." Adrian leaned against the wall, folding his arms. "Most people don't. It's one of the smaller facilities my company supports. We focus on communities that don't usually get the help they need." "Your company?" she asked, curious now. "Cole Urban Developments," he said simply. "We build housing and fund medical grants for low-income families." She blinked. "I've heard of that. Haven something?" "Haven Homes," he said with a nod. "We're still in early planning, trying to understand what families actually need." He paused, watching her carefully. "The problem is, we mostly hear from people like me, not from people who live that reality." Rachel hesitated. "If you want honesty, I don't think most people like me believe help is real anymore. We fill out forms, wait months, and get told there aren't enough funds." Adrian's expression didn't change, but his eyes held a trace of pain. "You sound like my sister," he murmured. "She used to say the same thing before she moved to the countryside. Her little boy got sick, and the hospital there didn't have what they needed." Rachel looked at him, realization dawning. "The daughter you mentioned last night?" "Yes," he said softly. "She was 10 months old. I was away on business when it happened." His voice dropped lower, almost to himself. "I've spent years trying to build systems that don't fail people like her. But sometimes I still feel like I'm too late." Rachel's throat tightened. She didn't know what to say, so she said what came naturally. "You weren't too late tonight." Adrian looked at her then, and for a fleeting second, the guarded look in his eyes gave way to something more human. Gratitude, maybe even peace. A nurse came in with forms for Rachel to sign. "We'll keep Oliver here until evening," she said kindly. "The antibiotics should bring the fever down completely." Rachel signed the papers, her handwriting shaky. When the nurse left, Adrian offered, "I'll come back around 6. You shouldn't have to walk home with him in this weather." "You've already done enough," she said quickly. "I can manage." "You said you live on Oak Ridge?" "For now," she admitted, "until the landlord sells the building." Adrian didn't push further. He only replied, "I'll see you tonight." He kept his word. That evening, when the snow had settled into quiet piles along the sidewalks, Adrian returned. Rachel was ready to leave, her small backpack slung over one shoulder, Oliver bundled in a borrowed hospital blanket. Adrian handed her a cup of hot tea from the cafeteria. "You haven't eaten," he said matter-of-factly. "You can't hide exhaustion as well as you think." She gave a tired laugh. "You sound like my old manager." "Was he right?" he asked. "Most of the time." The nurse gave her the discharge papers and a small bag of medicine. Rachel hesitated at the counter, frowning at the amount due. Adrian noticed. "Is there a problem?" "They said the hospital's short on subsidy funds," she murmured. "The antibiotics cost a bit more than I thought." Without a word, Adrian stepped forward and handed his card to the clerk. "Put it on this." Rachel stared at him, stunned. "No, you don't have to." "I know," he said gently, "but I want to." Outside, the world was still white and silent. Rachel adjusted Oliver's blanket and turned to him. "You're too kind, Mr. Cole." "Adrian," he corrected softly. "And kindness isn't a transaction, Rachel. Sometimes it's just what people owe each other." She didn't know how to respond. They stood there for a moment, under the faint glow of a streetlight, two people connected by nothing more than a storm and a small act of mercy. Then Adrian opened the car door for her again. "Come on, I'll drive you home. No mistakes this time." Rachel smiled for the first time that day. "Let's hope not." She slid into the passenger seat, Oliver asleep in her arms. As they drove through the snow-blanketed streets, the town lights shimmered like distant stars. She looked at him and thought how strange it was that sometimes the wrong road could lead you exactly where you were meant to be. The following morning, the snow had melted into slush along the curbs of Northbridge. The air was sharp but bright, and for the first time in days, Rachel felt she could breathe again. Oliver was back home, still drowsy from medicine, but smiling weakly as he traced shapes on the foggy window. She brewed weak coffee in their tiny kitchen, the sound of the kettle blending with the hum of the radiator. Everything smelled faintly of soap and disinfectant from the hospital, a scent that now felt like safety. A soft knock startled her. When she opened the door, Adrian stood there, his gray coat immaculate as always, a paper bag in one hand, and a faint, polite smile. "I brought breakfast," he said, "and something warm for him." Inside the bag were croissants and a small box of oatmeal. "You didn't have to do this," she said, though the gratitude in her voice gave her away. Adrian shrugged. "I wanted to make sure he's better." He glanced at Oliver. "How's the little man?" "Still coughing," she admitted, "but the fever's down." Adrian nodded and crouched near the child. "You did well, champ." Oliver blinked at him with sleepy curiosity. "Are you the man from the snow?" Adrian smiled. "I suppose I am." Rachel chuckled softly, covering her nerves. She had never had someone like him in her apartment before. Someone who looked like he belonged in magazine spreads, not in this narrow space with peeling paint. She motioned toward the only chair that wasn't broken. "Please sit." Adrian stayed standing, looking around thoughtfully, not judgmental, just observant. "You work nights?" "At the diner on 3rd, she replied. "And mornings at a laundromat when they need extra hands." "That's a lot," he said. "It's rent," she replied simply, brushing crumbs from the counter. When the conversation drifted, Rachel asked, "That project you mentioned at the hospital, the housing one, Haven Homes, right?" Adrian's expression shifted, more focused now. Yes, we're developing a housing model for single-parent families. Affordable, safe, with childcare options. But it's all theory so far. He paused, glancing at her. Most of what we know comes from surveys and data. Nothing beats hearing from someone actually living it. Rachel laughed faintly. You mean someone like me? I doubt my life would fit into your reports. That's exactly why I need it, he said. You see things we overlook. I realized that last night, when you said help doesn't feel real anymore. His tone wasn't polished like before. It carried something more personal. I've built buildings my whole life, but I'm still trying to figure out how to build trust. She looked at him for a long moment, unsure what to say. You sound like someone who wants to fix everything. Maybe I just want to fix one thing that matters, he replied quietly. And I think you can help me. She frowned slightly. Help you? How? 2 days later, while Rachel was folding laundry at the laundromat, her phone buzzed with a call from an unfamiliar number. A woman's crisp voice came through. Good afternoon, Ms. Monroe. This is Evelyn from Cole Urban Developments. Mr. Cole asked me to reach out. He'd like to invite you to consult on the Haven Homes project as a community advisor. It's part-time, flexible hours. Rachel froze, holding a towel mid-fold. Me? She asked, incredulous. Yes. It's a short-term role to provide insight into family needs and housing accessibility. You'd be compensated, of course. Compensated? $200 a session, the woman said. And childcare is provided during meetings. For a moment, Rachel couldn't breathe. $200 was almost what she made in 3 nights at the diner. She stammered, I don't have experience. Not the kind your people have. Mr. Cole believes experience isn't always in resumes, the voice replied. He said you'll understand what that means. That night, after putting Oliver to bed, Rachel sat at their small table, staring at the business card Adrian had left with her at the hospital. The gold letters gleamed softly in the lamplight. Adrian Cole, Cole Urban Developments. She turned it over and noticed a handwritten note she hadn't seen before. For when you're ready to talk about change. The next morning, she stood outside the glass doors of the Cole Urban building, nerves twisting in her stomach. Everything inside gleamed. White marble floors, clean lines, the faint scent of citrus and paper. A receptionist greeted her kindly, offering tea as she waited. When Adrian appeared, he looked different from the night she met him. Less formal, warmer somehow. You came, he said simply. I wasn't sure I should, she admitted. I've never been part of anything like this. Then that makes 2 of us, he said with a small smile. He led her into a meeting room where blueprints and model layouts covered the walls. Tell me what's wrong with all this, he said, gesturing to the designs. She blinked. Wrong? Yes, he said. If it doesn't work for people like you, it doesn't work at all. Rachel hesitated, then leaned forward, pointing at the plans. This, she said, tapping at the shared laundry space. No one's going to use it if it's only open 9 to 5. Parents who work nights need access too, and these daycare hours, most of us don't finish shifts until midnight. Adrian's brows lifted, impressed. What would you change? Longer hours. Maybe a small emergency fund for parents who can't afford medicine or winter clothes. He nodded slowly, jotting notes in the margins. You've already helped more than you think. Rachel flushed, unsure if he meant it. But when she looked up, he was smiling, not out of politeness but with genuine respect. For the first time in years, she felt like her words carried weight. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was being heard. And as she left the building later that day, snow beginning to fall again over Northbridge, Rachel realized something she hadn't in a long time. The storm that had nearly broken her might have also opened the only door she truly needed. The following week felt like stepping into a different world. Each morning, Rachel dropped Oliver off at a neighbor's apartment before taking the bus downtown to the Cole urban headquarters. The building's glass facade caught the winter light, shimmering like a promise she still didn't fully believe in. Her ID badge looked too official, her shoes too worn, and yet each day she walked through those doors, she reminded herself she belonged there, even if just for a little while. Inside, the office buzzed with quiet efficiency. Engineers discussed building codes. Designers spread out color samples for playroom walls. Rachel kept mostly to the corner during those early meetings, notebook open, listening more than speaking. But Adrian noticed. "You don't have to agree with everything," he said one afternoon when the others had left. "That's not why you're here." She hesitated, then gestured toward the floor plans pinned to the board. "Most of these designs, they're beautiful, but beauty doesn't keep a child safe when the heat fails. Have any of you ever tried sleeping in a room where you can see your breath?" Adrian's gaze was steady. "You have." She nodded. "Last winter, the furnace broke in our building. The landlord said he'd fix it after the holidays. I spent a week boiling water on the stove just to keep Oliver warm." Adrian picked up his pen and drew a quick line on the blueprint. "Backup generators in every unit," he said quietly. "Done." She stared at him, stunned. "Just like that?" "Just like that," he said. "We don't build walls here, we remove them." From that day on, Rachel spoke more freely. Her ideas came from the life she actually lived, where the bus never came on time, where parents worked nights, where kids outgrew shoes faster than paychecks could keep up. She suggested 3 major changes: a daycare center open late, an emergency fund for parents who couldn't afford medicine or winter coats, and public transportation vouchers built into rent plans. "If we make people choose between getting to work and paying rent," she said during one presentation, "we've already failed." The room went quiet. Then Adrian leaned back, eyes thoughtful. "Approved," he said. "All of it." After the meeting, Rachel returned to her small cubicle by the window, still shaking her head in disbelief. Evelyn, Adrian's assistant, stopped by with a grin. "You have no idea how many architects tried to get him to listen. You walk in here and change policy in 10 minutes. Rachel laughed, a little embarrassed. "I think he just feels sorry for me." "No," Evelyn said firmly. "He respects you. That's rarer." That evening, Adrian invited her to stay for a smaller planning session. Most of the staff had gone home. The office was quiet except for the soft hum of computers. He handed her a cup of tea instead of coffee this time. "You should try to rest," he said. "I know what overwork looks like." "Coming from you?" she teased, arching a brow. He smiled faintly. "Fair point." He gestured to the scale model of Haven homes on the table. Tiny houses lined around courtyards, with trees made of green paper. "You know," he said slowly, "when we started this company, I thought success meant skylines and profits. Now I just want to build something my daughter would have been proud of." Rachel looked at him, understanding passing between them in the silence that followed. "She would be," she said softly. Adrian exhaled, his shoulders easing for the first time all day. "Maybe," he said, "but I still can't shake the feeling that I've been chasing redemption instead of purpose." "Maybe they're the same thing," Rachel replied. He studied her face, the tired kindness in her eyes, and for a brief moment his expression softened completely. The next day, when Rachel arrived, Oliver was waiting in the reception area, coloring in a sketchbook. "He wanted to see where you work," Evelyn explained with a smile. Rachel scooped him up. "You can say thank you, buddy." Oliver turned to Adrian, who was standing nearby. "Mom says you build houses." Adrian knelt to his height. "Trying to," he said. "Maybe one day I'll build one for you." The boy grinned. "Can it have blue walls?" "Only if your mom approves," Adrian said, glancing up at Rachel. Her cheeks flushed. "We'll see," she murmured. That evening, as the office emptied and the winter sky turned violet, Rachel stayed behind to finish notes for the next meeting. Adrian was still at his desk. "You don't have to stay late," he said, gathering his papers. "Neither do you," she countered. "Old habits." He smiled. "Same here." For a while they worked quietly, the glow from the desk lamps painting soft halos around them. On his desk, the small glass snow globe gleamed under the light. Oliver had played with it earlier, shaking it until the flakes danced. Rachel reached out, turning it gently in her hands. Inside the miniature world, a tiny house stood amid swirling snow. On the base was a small engraving, "Home begins again." She looked up at Adrian, her voice barely above a whisper. "You keep this for her?" "Yes," he said. "It reminds me that what's gone doesn't have to be the end of something. Sometimes it's just the beginning." Rachel smiled faintly, placing the globe back. "Then maybe that's what you're building after all." Adrian studied her, thoughtful. "Maybe," he said again, softer this time. And for the first time since they met, the space between them didn't feel like two strangers trying to make sense of a storm. It felt like two lives quietly learning how to start again. By mid-February, the Haven Homes project was no longer just drawings and numbers. It was starting to feel real. Rachel's days blurred between meetings, site visits, and hurried dinners with Oliver before falling asleep over her notebook. Adrian trusted her more than ever. He asked for her opinion in every briefing, sometimes even waiting until she arrived before starting. For the first time in years, Rachel felt steady, like life was finally building towards something solid. Then everything began to unravel. It started on a gray Thursday morning. Rachel had just stepped off the bus when her phone buzzed with a notification. "Breaking news. Cole urban developments under investigation." Her stomach dropped. She scrolled quickly, her breath catching as headlines filled the screen. "Millions missing from Haven Homes Fund," and "CEO Adrian Cole silent amid scandal." At first, she thought it had to be a mistake, but when she reached the office, the atmosphere was heavy. Staff whispering in corners, phones ringing non-stop. Evelyn met her near the elevator, her usual calm replaced by tension. "Adrian's in meetings with legal," she whispered. "They think someone's been siphoning money from the project accounts." Rachel followed her into the conference room, where a few reporters had already gathered outside. On the table lay printouts of financial ledgers, red circles around transactions she didn't understand. "Who would do this?" she asked quietly. Evelyn sighed. "The media's already making their own story. They're saying the funds went to fake consulting firms. One of them listed under a name connected to a single-parent advisory contract." Rachel froze. "What?" "They're implying you might have been involved," Evelyn said reluctantly. The words hit like a physical blow. Within hours, her face appeared on gossip blogs, next to headlines like "From Struggle to Scandal" and "The Single Mom Who Fooled the CEO." Online comments multiplied, some cruel, others worse. That evening, she picked Oliver up from the neighbors and found the landlord waiting by the stairs. "I'm sorry, Ms. Monroe," he said uneasily, "but with your name in the papers, I just can't risk the attention." Her throat went dry. "You're evicting me?" "I have to think about the other tenants." She didn't sleep that night. Oliver tossed beside her, confused by her quiet crying. By morning, she'd decided to face Adrian. When she arrived at the office, security hesitated before letting her in. She caught sight of Adrian through the glass, surrounded by lawyers and board members. He looked exhausted but composed, eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. When he saw her, he excused himself and stepped into the hallway. "Rachel," he said carefully, "I was going to call you." "You should have," she snapped, voice trembling, "because now half the city thinks I stole money." "I know," he said quietly. "I'm trying to fix it." "Then why does everyone believe it? You said you trusted me." His jaw tightened. I do. But until we trace the transfers, everyone's under review. I can't control what the media says. She looked at him, tears rising. You don't get it. You get to wait this out behind glass walls. I have nowhere to go. They're evicting me. Adrian's face fell. I'll make sure you're protected. Don't, she said sharply. You already did enough. She turned and walked away before he could answer. Days passed in a blur of anxiety. She stopped checking the news, stopped answering calls from reporters. She focused on Oliver, taking extra shifts at the diner again, just to keep food on the table. But one evening, while she was closing up, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Check the news. It's not over. She opened the link and saw an article exposing Ethan Ward, Cole Urban's deputy finance director, as the true culprit. The investigation traced missing funds to shell companies registered under his brother's name. More shocking still, Adrian had personally turned in the evidence. The next morning, she found an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a short note in Adrian's handwriting. We found the truth, but I still want to hear yours. A meeting invitation was attached. For a long time, she stared at it, unsure if she had the strength to walk back into that building. But when Oliver looked up from his coloring book and asked, Mom, are we going to have to move again? She knew she couldn't keep running. That afternoon, she returned to Cole Urban headquarters. Cameras still crowded the sidewalk, but she ignored them and went straight to the elevators. Upstairs, Adrian was waiting, standing by the long glass windows that overlooked the snow-lined city. He turned when she entered, his expression unreadable but softer than before. You came, he said quietly. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, she admitted. But Oliver deserves to know I didn't do anything wrong. You didn't, he said firmly. And now everyone will know that too. Rachel crossed her arms. Then why am I here? Because I want you to see what we're doing next, he said. We're rebuilding the project. And this time, I'm not doing it without you. She hesitated, torn between anger and something deeper, something that still remembered the man who stopped in the snow that night. Why me after all this? He looked at her, eyes steady. Because even when the world was against you, you didn't stop caring about others. That's the person I want beside me. For a long moment, neither spoke. The snow outside fell in slow, deliberate flakes, quieting the city below. Rachel finally nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Then let's build it right this time. The morning of the press conference dawned cold and bright, the kind of crisp light that made even the glass towers of Northbridge look clean again. Snow lined the sidewalks like old scars, and inside Cole Urban's headquarters, tension hummed through every corridor. Rachel stood near the side entrance, clutching a folder against her chest. She hadn't wanted to come, not at first. She had told herself she was done being part of anything public, done having her name dragged across screens. But when Adrian's assistant Evelyn called and said quietly, "He's not doing this without you," Rachel had known she needed to be there. Through the glass wall, she could see Adrian on stage, standing behind the podium, his expression steady. Reporters filled the room, microphones like a forest of metal branches pointed at him. Cameras flashed as he began to speak. 3 weeks ago, our company faced accusations of financial misconduct, he said clearly. Those accusations were not only false, they targeted the very people this project was meant to help. Today, we're setting the record straight. He clicked a small remote, and the screen behind him lit up with evidence. Bank transfers, signed authorizations, offshore accounts, all leading back to Ethan Ward. Gasps rippled through the room. Adrian continued, his voice calm but edged with steel. The person responsible for diverting funds was Mr. Ward, our former deputy finance director. He acted alone, falsifying documentation to conceal his theft. Effective immediately, he has been terminated and referred to the authorities. The room buzzed, reporters whispering, cameras flashing. Then Adrian paused and looked toward the side of the stage, right where Rachel stood. "But there's someone else whose name was unfairly dragged through this storm," he said. "Someone who reminded me that change doesn't begin with power or profit. It begins with courage." His gaze met hers, steady, unflinching. "Rachel Monroe, would you join me, please?" The sound in the room dimmed as Rachel stepped forward. The lights were blinding, the air sharp with the clicks of cameras. Her knees trembled, but Adrian's quiet nod steadied her. She reached the podium, the folder still in her hands. He whispered, "You don't have to speak." But she shook her head. "Yes, I do." She took a deep breath, her voice soft but clear. "A month ago, I was just a mother trying to keep my son warm in a winter that never seemed to end. I didn't expect to find myself here. When the news came out, I thought it was over for us. But this man," she glanced at Adrian, "chose to see the truth even when it wasn't convenient." Her voice wavered, but she kept going. "I used to think that when people like me fall, no one looks twice. But sometimes, a stranger stops his car in the snow, and everything changes. I didn't steal anything. What I did was speak about what families need, what we all deserve: safety, dignity, and a chance." She looked out at the crowd, tears gathering. "If that makes me a headline, I hope it's one that says people like us matter." Silence hung for a moment. Then the room erupted in applause. Quiet at first, then building. Adrian placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her as cameras flashed. "Thank you," he murmured, "for saying what I couldn't." After the conference, they stood by the tall windows overlooking the city. Reporters filtered out, and the noise faded into the distance. Rachel turned to him. "You didn't have to do that. You could have handled this without me." Adrian shook his head. "No, you deserved to be seen. You weren't part of the problem. You were the reason we kept going." He exhaled, his voice softening. "The board's approving the rebuild of Haven Homes. Every plan you designed stays exactly as you drew it." Rachel blinked, surprised. "You're keeping my ideas?" "They weren't just ideas," he said. "They were the heart of it." He handed her a small envelope. "The first payment for your role as consultant, and an offer. I want you on the full-time leadership team when we relaunch." She opened it, the words swimming through tears. "Adrian, think about it," he said, smiling faintly. "And before you say no, remember, this time it's not a favor. You earned it." Later, as dusk settled, Rachel walked outside into the cold. Reporters were gone now, replaced by the hush of falling snow. Across the street, children's laughter echoed from a park, their boots crunching against ice. She stopped, watching them, thinking of Oliver. Her phone buzzed, a message from Adrian. "We did the right thing today." She typed back slowly. "We did what was true." Back home, Oliver was asleep on the couch, a half-finished drawing in his hand. 3 figures standing under falling snow, one small house behind them. Rachel smiled, brushing his hair back. She thought of how far they had come. From that frozen street to this quiet moment of peace. The world outside might still be cold, but inside her heart, something had shifted. That night, as she turned off the light, she whispered, "We're finally going to be okay." And somewhere in the silence of the city, she felt it. The steady rhythm of life beginning again. Spring came early to Northbridge that year. The snow melted from the sidewalks, revealing tulips pushing through the thawing ground. Where once there had been empty lots and construction fences, a row of pastel-painted buildings now stood. Haven Homes, the project that had nearly been destroyed, but was now alive, rebuilt, and real. Rachel stood outside one of the completed units, holding a clipboard, her hair tied up beneath a light scarf. The morning air smelled faintly of wet concrete and blossoms. She could hear the laughter of children echoing from the playground behind the new daycare building. It was opening day. Oliver tugged at her sleeve, his small backpack bouncing. "Mom, are we really living here now?" he asked. She knelt down, brushing a hand through his hair. "Yes, sweetheart. This is our home." The word home felt strange on her tongue. New, fragile, but right. She looked up as Adrian approached from across the courtyard, sleeves rolled, a coffee in each hand. "You're early," he said, smiling. "I wanted to make sure everything was perfect." "You're talking to a perfectionist," she teased. He handed her a cup. "Then I'm in trouble." They walked together toward the community center, the centerpiece of the complex. Inside, sunlight streamed through tall windows, glinting off the polished wood floors. The sign by the entrance read, "Northbridge Family Resource and Child Care Center. Director Rachel Monroe." She stopped for a moment, still not used to seeing her name there. "Do you remember what you said?" Adrian asked quietly. "About building something that felt real?" "I remember," she said. "I just didn't think I'd be standing inside it." The ribbon-cutting ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Local families gathered, city officials spoke briefly, and children darted between rows of chairs, their laughter filling the air. When it was Rachel's turn to speak, she stepped up to the small podium, palms damp but steady. "A few months ago," she began, "I thought life had given me every ending it could. I was wrong. Sometimes, endings are just the world's way of clearing space for a beginning." Her eyes found Adrian in the crowd. "This place exists because someone believed people like me and my son deserved to start again. So today, we open more than doors. We open possibilities." Applause followed, but what stayed with her was the quiet pride in Adrian's expression. After the ceremony, as the guests wandered off for refreshments, he joined her by the window, watching Oliver play outside with other children. "You did well," he said softly. "No," she replied. "We did." Later that afternoon, Rachel showed him around the daycare floor. The colorful rugs, the reading corner, the shelf of donated toys. On one of the walls hung a small framed quote she'd chosen. "This place exists because someone believed we could begin again." Adrian paused when he saw it. "You kept that," he said. "Of course," she replied. "It's what you gave me." He shook his head slightly. "No, you gave it to yourself." As the sun dipped lower, painting the courtyard in gold, Rachel and Adrian walked the paths between the new buildings. The smell of dinner drifted from nearby apartments, and the faint sound of music played from someone's open window. Families were moving in, filling the spaces with life. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. "The snow, the car?" "Every day," he said with a quiet laugh. "If you hadn't opened that door by mistake, if you hadn't stopped me from leaving," she added. They looked at each other then, a moment of unspoken gratitude passing between them. At the far end of the courtyard stood a small garden, Rachel's idea. Flowers, benches, and a carved wooden sign read Lantern Park, a place for families to gather when the lights of the city dimmed. Oliver ran ahead, waving a folded paper in his hand. "Mom! Mr. Cole! Look!" He held up a drawing of their family, himself in the middle, Rachel on one side, Adrian on the other, all holding hands beneath a house surrounded by blue sky. "Do you like it?" "I love it," Adrian said, kneeling to the boy's level. "Can I hang it in my office?" Oliver nodded proudly. As twilight settled, lanterns flickered on around the courtyard, bathing everything in soft amber light. Rachel stood beside Adrian, her heart full in a way it hadn't been in years. "You know," he said, looking around, "for a long time I thought my daughter was my last chapter, but now I think she just led me to this one." Rachel's eyes shimmered. "To us," she said softly. He turned to her, the faintest smile touching his lips. "To new beginnings." That night, in their new apartment, Rachel tucked Oliver into bed. On his nightstand sat the little glass snow globe Adrian had given them. Oliver turned it upside down, watching the flakes swirl around the tiny house inside. "Mom," he murmured sleepily, "it's snowing again." She smiled. "Yes, sweetheart, but this time we're warm." Downstairs, she found Adrian waiting in the common room, hands in his pockets. Through the window, the first stars were appearing. He glanced at her, quiet but certain. "You finally got your second chance," he said. She shook her head gently. "No, Adrian, we both did." Outside, the lights of Haven Homes glowed softly against the night, a beacon for every family still searching for a place to begin again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Midus Stories for more tales of courage, kindness, and second chances that remind us sometimes one small act can build an entire home.